Hello everyone, Deviance Shadow Prophecy back with another daily discussion for Deviance Gaming. Today I will be talking about the new ban list that has been released for the OCG meta of Cardfight Vanguard. The cards that were hit in question are the Hetero Round G-Guard for the Gear Chronicle clan, the 7 Seas Helmsman Nightcrow, which is a grade 1 that specializes in the 7 Seas grade 1 Rush deck for Granblue, and also Mick the Ghosty and Family, which is more of a Night Rose staple in the Granblue deck. So why were these cards hit? And I do apologize if there is a little bit of background noise, that you'll just hear some cars and possibly a little bit of rain in the background there, and I do apologize for that. So why were they hit? So Helmsman, especially in the OCG, is a massive problem because it just allows so much advantage to go over to the 7 Seas Rush deck for essentially no cost. You just retire a unit and you're able to call Nightcrow to the field. So essentially that is totally free. It allows you to fix columns. So essentially you bring out your Night Runner and then retire that for your Nightcrow, and you can essentially go, oh, 9 plus 7 is 16. And it's a really easy way to fix columns. Which is essentially the biggest problem with the 7 Seas Rush deck, is how consistently it's able to hit its magic numbers, and especially with the grade 2 that allows you to call other things, as well as the grade 2 that gets power when you call things from the drop zone. It's just essentially a really efficient way that the deck functions and the way that it works. So that's sort of why Nightcrow was hit. In terms of Hetero Round, I don't particularly agree with the Hetero Round to 1. Again, in the OCG meta, it seems like Hetero Round and Gear Cat, and especially it is adapting into the TCG meta as well. Hetero Round being the G-Guard when you've got Vainglory Gear Cat on the field, giving your Vanguard 10k, is a massive tempo swing on your opponent's turn when you're trying to guard them. But instead of hitting the G-Guard, would it not be better to hit the stand, the Gear Cat, the stand trigger that actually gives the power? I know Hetero Round is disruptive, and there's arguments for, oh, why isn't Denial Griffin on this list as well? Well, Kagero is not really doing anything right now. But the same thing can sort of be said for the Night Rose G-Guard. Essentially, it's a defensive play that you can do on your opponent's turn. Like, you can retire your Negrolazy or your Cannoneer and just retire one of their units that hasn't attacked yet, and that's really, really good. So I think it's not so much the G-Guard that is the issue in terms of the disruption play for the Gear Chronicles. I think it's actually the Gear Cat that needed to be hit. Granted, Hetero Round at 1 is still fantastic. Like, that card will still be used at 1 in every Gear Chronicle deck, and a lot of the OCG lists were only running 1. So essentially, it can free up another G-Guard spot for us to run perhaps the new Arlem G-Guard, which is really good as well, which will still activate the Gear Cat if I'm not mistaken. As I said, I'm not particularly familiar with that new Arlem G-Guard. I've not seen it yet. I haven't really looked into that, so we'll see how that impact goes. Another reason is a lot of Gear Chronicle decks at the moment are running 5 G-Guards, so you essentially can go, I'll just run 4 G-Guards, I'll add in another tech card being, especially in the OCG, they don't run original Chronos Command Dragon, so that they might end up putting that in, or another Hanlong, the trial deck Stride that came, or perhaps a Fate Rider if they couldn't fit it in before. There's no reason for a Gear Chronicle deck to have to run 5 G-Guards. Like, obviously you're not gonna not run Uluru at least 1 copy because it's really, really good. Your Hetero Round at 1 or 2 because that card's really good, and then I believe it's Rafana is the other G-Guard that lets you put a grade 1 or higher, search a grade 0, and get 15k, which is again really, really good. So you've essentially got 3 G-Guards right there that are really, really good, and you'll run 1 Rafana 100% of the time because you'd be silly not to. It just adds way too much utility. 1 to 2 Ulurus now. A lot of people were running 2 Hetero Round, 1 Uluru, but now I think that because of this restriction, because it's not a ban, because Bushiroad doesn't particularly like to ban cards, you'll see that perhaps we'll start to see the return of two Uluru, Or maybe it'll just be one Uluru, one Arlem, one Rafana, and one header around. Perhaps even if they play 5, it'll be 2 Uluru, 1 Arlem, 1 header around, 1 Rafana, something along that line. As I said, you know, there's reasons for playing 5G guards, reasons to not play 5G guards. It's really up to the discretion of the player, and we'll essentially see how the OCG meta adapts to this. I don't think that header around was the problem, because essentially the unit it retires will come back. So you essentially aren't really losing out. Like, yeah, for instance, let's say you're playing against a Shadow Paladin player and they've got a Hoel that's been pumped a fair few times by calling a few grade 1s. You've sacked some Kahedans and hit with your Vanguard to call even more grade 1s, and they attack with like their other column, and you header around and get rid of the Hoel. That's devastating to them. That's put their whole turn pretty much for nothing. And I do see how that is annoying, but essentially the issue I find with the header around G-Guard is actually the 10k power. That for me is the issue, because even against, let's say, a Nova Grappler deck, they're still able to push through you spinning their rear guard. Like, it's not a big issue, because they can essentially, if they haven't attacked with their Vanguard yet, you can essentially just put all your triggers and all your effects onto the rear guard that hasn't attacked yet and make it really, really large. And essentially, yeah, I don't think that header around was the issue. I think it was actually the Gear Cat that was the problem. Anyway, we'll move on from Gear Chronicles, because I could talk all day about that particular ban. We'll move on to Mick the Ghosty. Now, Mick the Ghosty is a fantastic, fantastic stand trigger for the Grand Blue deck, and it has seen play in both the Seven Seas Rush deck as well as the a Night Rose deck, and both decks use it a little bit differently. The Night Rose deck uses it as really a utility tool. I'm going to call it get 10k and then put it back into my deck, and if the game goes long, my deck will essentially consist of Bale the Ghosties, Maltreat Shades, and Mick the Ghosty. So you can essentially stop yourself from decking out by essentially looping those cards through and through. And you're able to buy 1, 2, perhaps even 3 turns if you are able to do like a perfect setup with just those cards. And I do see how that is an issue. The best thing about this particular ban is that Night Rose is now going to only be able to essentially live for 1 turn that they wouldn't be able to before they deck out. And that's a big thing, because in the late game, if their deck consists of 4 stand triggers, 2 Bales, and 2 Maltreat Shades, because that's around about the normal amount that people will play, that 4 out of their 8 cards are stand triggers. And for instance, if they go into their Generation Break 8, or even a Negro Songa, a Dragoot, Goash if they haven't used their second one, that is game ending. It's really, really hard to beat that, because they essentially can attack with their rear guards, and then they have a 50% chance that gets greater if they don't pull a stand trigger on like each of their checks. So it's 50% being 4 and 4, and then it'll go up if they don't pull a stand trigger. Obviously, it'll go down if they do pull the stand trigger, but essentially you're just able to restand really, really big columns. And especially if you're able to, let's say, call those ghosty units and retire them to shuffle them back into your deck, the units that will be able to be restood off of the effect of the stand trigger will already have a 10k boost in addition to the 5k off the trigger, and that's very, very hard to beat. So I do understand why they've restricted Mick the Ghosty and family. I think that's a very, very good preventative measure, and I wouldn't be remiss if we did see that over in the TCG meta. So impact on the OCG meta that we will see. It's hard to say. It's really hard to speculate on something that you don't really know a whole lot about. Essentially, Luard isn't super popular there, but that's mainly because Night Rose is so popular over there. So it's really obvious to see a banning towards a Grand Blue deck. And I really did expect that. So in terms of their meta, I think the decks aren't going to change too much. Luard will probably see a little more play over there just because it hasn't been restricted at all. They may see a little bit more of a rise in the Legend deck, which may be another reason behind these bannings and things like that. But I don't think that we will ever see a day that Gear Chronicle and Nitros are just completely pushed out of the meta for a very long time. And I'm going to take a few minutes now to talk about a ban list that if a ban list were to come to the Western meta and the TCG, would it be the same, and what would it consist of for us, as well as what would I like to see on a ban list? So I think, as I've said before, I don't think header around is the issue. I think that the Gear Cat giving the 10k power is the issue. So I think that for me, actually banning that card is a very good thing, because a lot of Gear Chronicle players will only run that at 1 or 2 copies. So restricting it to 1 is not really a big deal, like, because I personally only run 1 in my Gear Chronicle deck, and if it gets damage trigger checked, I'm like, that's a shame. I can't do that combo. But it doesn't really feel like the deck will stop working without it. Now, without header around, it's kind of like, oh, well, I'll play Arlem, I'll play Uluru, I won't lose anything. So I don't think that the Gear Chronicle restriction in the OCG meta has actually done what it wants to do. So I would like to see Gear Cat go, or Melon be hit to 1 and an Urwar's Heart unbanning. And there are reasons for this. One, I would like to see Chronofang actually be a really good deck. And Melum at 1 actually forces a Gear Chronicle deck to think about and like actually construct how they want their plays to go down. So if you essentially get a Melum in hand, you're set to go, or you will have to stride into a Gear Dragon, call a grade 0 and time leap it to a grade 1, or use your History Maker. There's no just, oh look, I've got 4 Melums in my deck, thank you very much, I'm good to go no matter what. I think that is a very big issue right now in Gear Chronicle decks, and I think it needs to be looked at. Will we see the Nightcrow ban? I don't particularly think so. Seven Seas Rush over here hasn't done a whole lot, so I don't particularly think we can see that. Mick the Ghosty, I think that is probably the card to hit in Granblue, just because it does add so much utility to the deck. It allows it to live so much longer than it normally would be able to, as well as perhaps Goash to 2, so that you can only use it as a first stride to proc your Generation Break 2, or even changing Nightrose GB2 with an errata to say only during your turn can you use its effect to mill 3 and call things from the drop. I think that would be a good way to balance Granblue while still keeping it at the relative tier level that you want it. Other cards I would really like to see, I'd like to see Belial Owl to 1 copy or 2 copies. That card is insanely free. It takes a Shadow Paladin deck from actually losing resources and recovering them with Luard's skill, which is fantastic. They really, really needed that, to essentially all their skills being free, as well as being able to recycle whatever they want with Luard. And I think that's a little bit too good. Especially with the infinite PG cycle if you're running that, or you've got your Unflip engine being your Hoels, your Kahedans, your PGs if you run that type of PG. Your Plotmaker G-Guard, which is an immediately a 36k because it gets 25k shield if you're at RIT 3, which is really, really good as well. That deck is streamlined, it's ready to go. And it's really, really popular in the West. Like, Luard is probably the best deck in the West, just because people aren't as proficient with Nightrose as they are overseas, which is why we see a lot more Nightrose over there and the bans more towards Nightrose. And over here, I think we would see them more catered towards a Luard deck and Gear Chronicle, because those 2 decks are absolutely crazy. What else I would like to see on it is a preventative measure for Royal Paladins. I would like to see either a change on the Blaster engine, as in an errata to say you need to have a Alfred or Blaster Vanguard, and that will just completely solve the issue of the Blaster engine, or putting the Flogel Critical, or even Blaster Blade I think would do it, to around 1 copy. And I think that will essentially take the sting out of the Royal Paladin deck. I don't think they will do that because it'll affect their sales too much. However, after the deck is released, I would like to see, before we move to the end of the Bushiroad Championship Series, either an emergency update to the ban list that essentially affects the Blaster engine or the critical triggers and things like that. They're my thoughts on what the ban list does and should be for over here. As always, I would like to hear your comments down below, and if you've got a difference of opinion, we can absolutely have a discussion about that. I think that'd be really, really healthy. So please leave your thoughts on the OCG ban list and essentially what I've thought about the ban list for the TCG meta down below. I'd like to hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.